Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We've got a lot of great content to get through today. Just seeing there's a lot of people still joining the session. So whilst we give you all a chance to get settled in, I'm just going to run through a little bit of housekeeping. So all the slides that we go through today will be sent out to you afterwards and they will be available for download. The recording will be sent out afterwards as well. So you can forward that on to any of your colleagues and you'll have a copy for yourself. By default, everybody is on mute, but you'll notice there's a chat function that you can use to ask questions, comments, just say hello, and we'll be monitoring that throughout. You can also use that if you've got any technical issues or you need any support at all. Well, I'm very fortunate this morning to be joined by a panel of esteemed experts in the world of employee experience. We have Duncan Casemore, who's the CTO and co-founder here at Applaud. We have Chris Duval, who is the Director of People and Organisation at PwC. We have Elmo Hildebrand, who is a partner at PwC, and myself, Marketing Director here at Applaud. So before we get into the meat of the content today, I'm just going to hand over to Duncan to tell you a little bit about who we are at Applaud and how we work with PwC.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, good day to everybody. We're delighted to be running this session today in collaboration with our partners, PwC. Applaud is a workforce experience layer. It's a mouthful. I think what we've noticed and what we'll be talking a little bit about today is just a proliferation of technologies within the workplace. And Applaud is really a one-stop shop that gives employees a place where they can get access to their digital HR and work services without having to navigate a whole load of complexity and difficult spaces. And so we're working together in partnership with PwC, helping forward-thinking organizations with the design of employee experiences and the future of work. So we're delighted to be talking about the topics today. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Duncan. So as we all know, we've just been through 18 months of monumental change, and that's had a huge impact on the world of employee experience. So to better understand the landscape as it stands today, we worked with Forrester earlier in the year to commission a piece of research into the future of HR and the impact of consumer grade technology. We surveyed 175 HR leaders from across the globe, and these findings underpin the research that we're going to be talking to you today. So before we kind of get into that, let's talk about why we should care about digital employee experience and why businesses should invest in this space. Duncan, don't know if you want to kick us off here.
Sure, more than happy to. I think employee experience can be very much a soft consideration to some, and I think we've always got to keep an eye on the business case and the actual value that it can bring. And there's enough thinking out there now and enough evidence to suggest that organizations with a brilliant employee experience have a brilliant customer experience, and ultimately a great employee experience leads to better revenue, more competitive advantage. But to bring it down a little bit more, this slide here puts some numbers around some of the ROI that you can typically get from improved employee experience. We often focus a lot around productivity gains, but it's really important to note that that can sometimes be hard to get through the eyes of a CFO, and actually a lot of the value here can be around things that improving retention. So employees and managers with a really poor experience in the first few months, first few days of their organization has a massive bearing on retention. And we know how expensive it is to recruit people. So improved employee and manager retention is a really key benefit that you can get from designing great employee experiences, great onboarding experiences. And also a better employee experience reduces traffic into HR as well. So it frees up HR's time to focus on value-added tasks rather than mundane operational day-to-day HR activities. So that's really some of the fundamentals around that. The Forrester report here talks about 397% ROI with the right type of investment into employee experience. So some really strong numbers on there. I don't know if Rachel, do we spend more time on this? Do we open this up?
No, I think unless Elmo or Chris has anything they want to add to why we should be investing in digital employee experience.
Yeah, I think Duncan, you've summarized it well. I think, from our side, Rachel, we're seeing a lot more clients asking how they measure this, because obviously these are some of the benefits that they are after, and they can see the impact of poor experience. But it is often a case of, accurately measuring your employee experience through, various mechanisms, and that is what we're talking to clients quite often about. Chris, I don't know if you can add anything there.
Yeah, just in terms of a broader employee experience comment, is that it's very much driven by individual preferences, individual behaviors, and how people interact with the organization. So a good employee experience will have to cater for those individual preferences, and the preferences today are very different to the preferences that it was a while ago. So I think the digital layer adds to the proposition there, because we have to respond to the individual preferences of people.
Great, thank you. So when we first published the research, this was actually one of the statistics that got the most attention. 75% of organisations are planning to upgrade the technology that they already have in place, rather than adding more into the mix. I just want to open this up to you guys. Why do we think that that's the case? Why do we think businesses are wanting to improve what they've got, rather than adding more technology, more solutions, and more tools into their arsenal?
I think, one of the things that came out of the Forrester report is that a lot of organizations have multiple of HR technologies in place already, but that very often these technologies are quite disparate. So, there is a need to make sure that the various pieces of technology talk to one another and respond to the needs and the desires of the employees. So, perhaps that would be why there is a focus on upgrading their technology rather than adding more to the mix of technologies.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and adding to that, Chris, I think the investment that has gone into the existing HR systems are really high. So it's been a massive investment, and if the returns are not there and the experience of those systems are not optimal, then obviously that is going to be an inhibitor for them to invest more. And they are definitely, all our clients are definitely looking at alternatives, and this is just one of those options that they are looking at, of putting a layer on top of their existing investments to try to extract value out of their HR. I think it's also very important to look at, if you consider the role of technology in employee experience, it's very important to see technology, kind of, if technology doesn't work in an organization, people very quickly pick it up. If it does work, it kind of flows below the radar, and people don't really talk about how amazing that is. So it's very important also to look at that role that technology plays in the employee experience.
Yeah, I think that picks up on saying that, right? That if you can have lots of really great technology, but if they're not speaking to each other, that actually is inhibiting the experience in and of itself. Don't know, Duncan, if you've got anything you wanted to add to this point.
I think it's what Chris and Elmo said is so spot on. I think many organisations have spent the last 10 years getting some of their back-end technologies in shape. We have the head of resourcing buying the best applicant tracking system, the head of learning buying the best LMS, country-specific payroll managers buying the best payroll systems, and we've ended up with 15, 20 different HR applications, 60 to 100 different work applications. And what we probably needed is a catalyst for change, and guess what? That's happened. We've stopped now thinking about, do we rip and replace a particular component with something new, disruptive, expensive projects, or do we actually stop now and think about actually what are the needs of our employees, you know, what technology mix do we now need to support hybrid work and the new ways of working, we're going to look at spending our technology budgets in slightly different ways. We're going to try and invest in technologies which care a little bit more about the employees' needs, rather than some of the inward needs of HR. And I think HR have done such an amazing job of really reorganizing themselves around the needs and designs of employees, being a service-centered organization. And I think, you know, we're looking at buying new types of technologies that are really focused around being employee first rather than HR first. And I think that's changed the way we're spending money.
I think that
Duncan, if I could, sorry, Rachel.
Go ahead.
If I can add to that, we spoke about, you know, employee preferences, but I think employees are also getting smarter, and they want a consumer grade experience. They want to have the same type of experience that the organization's customers get. So they want that customer level of experience internally in their own world. And I think that could also be a driver for, you know, wanting to let these various applications talk to each other so that you can have that consumer grade experience.
Yeah, definitely.
So Duncan, I think an obvious question some of the audience might have in this instance is, you know, if my HR systems are really that poor, you know, I need to invest, you know, so ultimately I'll need to implement some form of a record, and, you know, some of the supporting technologies that's absolutely necessary. Yeah, and I think that's still it doesn't negate the need for an experience layer that ties everything together. Yeah, so I don't think it's the one or the other. You can actually, if you are planning to invest, if you're part of the other, you know, 20% that are planning to invest in a new technology, you know, this can still support you in really improving and accelerating your employee engagement and experience.
Yeah, so completely true. Sorry, Rachel.
No, you're fine. So I think that actually leads us quite nicely onto this next statistic that came out loud and clear, which is that businesses are still struggling to deliver consistent experiences for their in-office workers compared with their remote workers. I think it's quite interesting that we're having this conversation now, where pre-pandemic, I don't think there was that much of a focus on what the employee experience was like for the remote employee. So why do we care about this now? Why are we talking about this now? Why is it so important today?
Well, I think you want all of your employees to have the same experience. So you need to understand what the various journeys are, what the moments that matter would be among those journeys, and then to ensure that regardless of where you are working from, that you have the same experience. We recently worked with a client in the financial services sector who had to adapt, you know, to remote working. It was a call center environment, and some of the call center operators were, you know, in the office, others were at home. So, you know, the supervisor now, you know, having to deal with escalated problems, had to adapt to, you know, people working in the office and people working from home. And you want that to be the same regardless of where the person works from, so you have the same ease of access to the supervisor. And that's just a small example, but all of the journeys that employees, you know, have in their working day, understand those moments that matter, and make sure that there's the same experience regardless of where you're working from.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to see the change. I think we've got used to working at home. It looks like we have pretty much 100% home working video on right now, and the organizations that are really digital pioneers have found this easier, I think it's fair to say, than other organizations that have had a lot more change around this. But really, up until, you know, pre-pandemic, home workers were kind of second-class citizens, and the experience was very much office first, or from shop workers first. And we've really had to roll out the red carpet for our home workers as part of this, or our remote workers, now our anywhere workers. I think the challenge now is how do we how do we help managers continue to engage with their hybrid workforce? Because managers own most of the touch points that actually impact employee experience. And how do we, what is the right mix of technologies that we can deploy to help keep our remote workers or all of our workforce engaged wherever they are at all times? And I think that's really the next challenge. And the technology kind of plays a small part of that, really. Technology should just underpin a broader strategy, but equally, technology plays a critical role in this as well. And you've got to have the right mix of technologies to really underpin and support those future strategies.
Yeah, and again, I think the role of technology there, Duncan, in making sure that you've got a consistent culture across the remote and office workers is so important. Yeah. It's quite interesting if you look at the other statistic there, the lack of visibility into workforce data, which is also very difficult. And we are seeing that a lot in our conversations with clients as well. Is historically decisions were taken without data necessarily supporting decisions. Right now, it's a big concern with all the technology that we have. Where do we get the data to help us make decisions better? It's another key area that our clients are talking to us quite often about.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. Which areas of HR are costing businesses the most? So something that came out of the research is that 90% of organisations believe their employees and managers lose between 2 to 4 hours per week for HR tasks. I think even when the four of us were talking about this ahead of the webinar, one of the questions that we had was, is that good? Is that bad? What does good look like? Duncan, I know you went away and did some research into that. So do you want to talk about what good looks like, how much time you should realistically be expecting your employees and managers to be spending on HR tasks, as that's not going to go away even with the best technology in the world. There's always going to be a HR component to roles.
Yeah, no, of course, and the answer is, of course, it varies. But I think what's really clear with the Forrester report here is that there's a lot of time wasted, and that better programs of work and successful programs of work cut that by as much as 50% in some cases. So if we're looking at 4 hours spent on HR tasks per week, can we get that to 2 hours? It isn't, of course, all about productivity savings. We saw in the ROI at the beginning that there's a lot more tangible benefits we can get from better employee and digital employee experience. But I think if we can find ways of saving time, where we've ended up is we bought all of this technology, and now we have an environment that's too complicated for most employees and managers to navigate. They have all these different technologies they engage with. They have all these different departments they need to speak to. And sometimes completing a simple HR process like hiring somebody or promoting somebody or transferring somebody is just so complicated. There's so many different touch points and places that we have to go to and people we have to speak to. And it's not consumer grade. It's complicated. Managers often don't do these things every single day. They may do something like transfer an employee once or twice a year, and every time they do it, they have to completely relearn the process because they've forgotten. And how do we really redesign that to really make it consumer grade and employee and manager first? Because that's the fundamentals that will then drive some of those productivity gains. I'd be really interested to hear Chris and Elmo's views on how we go about driving that, that future of employee experience.
Yeah, well, look, employee experience is made up of a whole lot of parts, of which the engagement with the technology is part of. So if we are able to reduce the frustration levels in terms of engaging with the HR technology, you will get better, utilization of it. So the more people use it, the more accurate your data would be. So if you consider a typical HR system will require me to have, my name and my ID number and everything on it, but some of that information might change over a period of time. If I'm frustrated with the use of the technology, I might not go and update all of my skills, my qualifications on the system. And when you then need to draw reports, you might have compromised information. So I think a better experience will lead to better utilization and usage by the employees, which in turn will improve on the quality of your data that is within your technology. But also, if we can reduce the time spent on frustrating, activities or tasks, it will free us up to do more of the work that we want to do. So it will, free up time to do deep thinking work and to really focus on what I like to do as opposed to what I need to do and is now a frustration to do as well. Alma, I don't know if you have anything else there that you,
Yeah, maybe approaching it from, what does the technology landscape look like? Duncan, you mentioned earlier that we've got 15, or 10 systems already implemented at our clients and in their organizations. And if you think about simplifying that experience, the challenge is in integrating those systems. Yeah, so making sure that the workflows span seamlessly across all of those systems as you need to, like Chris says, reduce the friction. And that is a big challenge. It's a costly exercise for them to firstly design those workflows that need to run across systems and then to go and technically implement the integration. It's very difficult and it's costly and it's complex. And by the time that you've got that workflow automated almost or integrated, then it's time to replace some of your systems and you have to redo that. So that really is, from a technology perspective, a big challenge. But yeah, Chris, I think Duncan, it really is about simplifying, taking the frustration out of it. And I think when it comes to technologies, how do you create those workflows that span, that sit across, almost seamlessly tie all your systems together and gives you access to the right information and data that you need at the right point. That is critical. That is where the frustration comes in.
Mm-hmm. It's quite interesting. I've been in this space for a while. I'm not going to declare how many years right now, but I recall that we started solving this by putting together portals, and what ended up happening is they basically became link farms, and you end up with these sites that are just like hundreds and thousands of hyperlinks off to all these other places. And actually, hey, guess what? It didn't actually help at all. It just made it more complicated, more places to click through to. And if we want to do this well, we do have to really bite the bullet and get that integrated, seamless experience that you're talking about, Elma. That's really the only way that we can really simplify this. And again, back to your point, Chris, about maybe we lose 2 hours a week, but actually perhaps we could be engaging with and getting better utilization out of some of those technologies if some of that was better exposed. I think learning management systems is a good example of where we buy brilliant systems, but people just forget to go to log in, to find the link, to log into them, to look at the learning they can take. And if we're actually better able to expose some of that higher up in the employee's journey at the time they need it, where they want it, maybe you should take this learning now. Maybe now's a good time to look at this. But actually would drive better utilization, so we can cut down on those admin tasks and at the same time get more value from this technology we already have on our estate.
Yeah, I think that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Elmo.
Sorry, Rachel. I just wanted to say, if you translate the hours for big organizations, the savings in hours and productive time that you can utilize in other parts of your organization, I mean, that is really what we are seeing our clients are after. I mean, that productivity gain, as you mentioned on the first slide as well, Duncan, that really frees up, and Chris, I think you mentioned this as well, it frees up your staff and employees to actually spend the time and energy that they have in productive work. Yeah.
I think that segues really nicely actually into this next slide. So we know at the moment that globally it's hard to hire the best people and to retain the best people, and all this remote working has really opened up new geographies for candidates. So what role do you think digital employee experience can play in differentiating organisations and really putting them in a good position to retain and attract the best people out there?
So if we consider technology and an employee's engagement with the technology really starts from before that person becomes an employee. So it starts from the recruitment process. So that is the first touch point that a prospective candidate will have with your organization. And then, you know, if that candidate is successful, you know, the onboarding, the continuous learning throughout his career, and then eventually exit. So if that interaction from that very starting point is a positive one, it contributes to the satisfaction levels. And of course, you know, one can consider satisfaction to be a relatively low standard, and that you know, one should really strive for excellence. And I think the challenge here for HR leaders is to be really excellent in this employee experience, because you know, just having satisfied employees might be setting the bar a little bit too low. You want it to be, you know, really wow. And we all know that there is you know, a constant need to fight for good candidates and to keep your talent. So employee experience then is a key differentiator, and it's not necessarily something that you know, is too difficult to get right, but it is quite easy to get it wrong. And I think you know, that digital component of the employee experience, because employee experience looks at, you know, a variety of things, of which the digital component is one of, but it becomes a key differentiator in attracting the right people, you know, on that portal that they need to go onto to submit their CVs, all the way in, you know, in the life cycle. And I think this is important for HR leaders to take note of, because you will be competing with people that are getting it right.
Yeah, and Chris, I think you mentioned it earlier. Sorry, Rachel. I think you mentioned it earlier as well, is that employees want the experience that the customers are getting. And I think customer experience, employee experience, and another one that we've coined leadership experience, you know, but customer experience, employee experience, they really go hand in hand. And I think you mentioned it earlier, Chris, as well. And what we've seen through the pandemic is that the focus on transforming your customer experience to become a lot more digital has accelerated. Everybody talks about that, and we're seeing probably a 5-year acceleration in that. And I think what a lot of organizations are realizing is that in the big resign that we are all in right now, where people are just leaving organizations, you know, they need to be able to hang on to their employees and their staff. Yeah. And that is why they are now starting to see employee experience in a similar weight of importance as customer experience. And they're trying to look at those two things at the same time, which is very encouraging, because we believe that that is key for them to retain their talent.
Mm-hmm. Duncan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I think HR teams have just had a pretty phenomenal roller coaster, and have actually done some incredible things. I know we were very much focused around reorganizing our operating model for, you know, with shared services and centers of excellence, and you know, many of us have transitioned to that new HR operating model pre-pandemic, and I think I'm starting to see so many organizations really do phenomenal jobs of just completely rethinking the function of the HR department and having it entirely service focused. And I just think it's so wonderful. We're seeing organizations adopt agile and really structure themselves about being able to innovate much more quickly as a HR team. And that's that right operating model to be really service focused, and to have everyone in the HR function really thinking that way, because for many that's quite a big shift in mind, a big mindset shift to really adopt that service focused approach. I think is the key to be able to innovate faster, to be able to adopt digital technologies more quickly, to align them more accurately to the vision and strategy of the HR function. And I think that, you know, that's why we're seeing technologies such as no code really come to the forefront, because it's aligned with the new HR that's very much focused around a faster, more agile, innovative way delivering service to the employees, and that to me is such an important thing. And I'd really, it's really exciting to see so many organizations adopt that and really embrace it and have, a completely new org structure surrounding that.
Thank you, Duncan. Any other comments on this before we move on from Alma or Chris?
Yeah, maybe just Chris, your reflections of HR leaders and talking to them. But Duncan, I can't echo more. I think HR leaders have really done a stellar job. I mean, in the times that we've seen in the last 18 to 24 months, I mean, the change and the pace of change has actually been tremendous. And I think keeping all these balls in the air was just phenomenal. And I honestly think that there's so much opportunity for HR leaders to use what they've done and achieved in the last 18 months for, to achieve much better things going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also on the people analytics side, I'm just thinking HR leaders have definitely a bigger need to understand the analytics around their people, whether it is around skills, whether it's around competencies, career aspirations, and what I think is happening is that there is a renewed focus on understanding from an analytical point of view of just who is my workforce and what are my future needs of the organization, what does my organization need in future, and do I have what I need to achieve the aspirations of the organization. So by engaging staff members more with the technology layer, the quality of your analytics will be so much better.
Yeah, so that's such a good point, Chris. I think and experience layers and experience platforms is one area where it can pull together the intersection of both transactional data and experiential data, and actually so much of the useful analytics data that we can make more of to drive better employee experience is unstructured experiential data. And traditionally we haven't been great at collecting that. We have our annual survey and that's disconnected from the reality of the transactional and persona data. And if we can find ways of consolidating both of those parts and feed that into an analytics platform, it gives us some really exciting insights that can feed into better employee experience. I think it's understated, but I think it's such an important area that is really going to be massive.
Thank you. So now we're into the questions portion. We've had a few questions come in before the session, and I've just noticed a couple have come in during the session as well. So one that I think actually feeds really nicely into, Chris, what you were just saying there was what role will personalization play in employee experience moving forward? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think it was a part of the opening comments there was, that individual behaviors, individual traits and preferences will drive how people interact with the organization, and the organization needs to be prepared for that, because you have multi-generations, working for you, each with a specific preference. And I think to personalize that journey for each individual is critical. It will enhance, every person's view of how much they are valued, and I think will simply add to a much more positive employee experience. So I think catering for individual needs to the extent possible will have to form part of a future strategy.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Rachel, I think we talk about the customer data and making sure that we understand our customers, and we apply analytics on our customer data, structured and unstructured, to try to understand how we can better serve our customers. Similarly, we need to move to that point where we are also applying analytics and making it very personal to get a personal understanding of our staff as well. And obviously with privacy and all other rules, applied and, adhered to. But I think that really drives the kind of hyper-personalization when it comes to employee experience as well. I want my organization to really understand what my needs are. Where am I in my my career? What needs do I have from a learning? What development areas do I have? What wellness issues am I experiencing, and how can they engage with me at that point in time? So that is similar how we are dealing with our customers in terms of our customer analytics. So that hyper personalization, I think, is super important.
Yeah, for sure. Duncan, do you have any thoughts on this you want to add?
Everything Elmo said.
Good. Other really great questions have come in here. What is being done to assimilate various generational challenges towards the digital integration? I don't know, Elmo, I think you might be quite well positioned to take this one.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question, Rachel, and I think that's one of the big challenges I think HR leaders are struggling with today. Excuse me. So the population on the African continent is getting younger, whereas populations in other parts of the world actually getting older. So I think in Africa, we're going to have, or we're already seeing that you've got very, very young people working in an organization, also with older generation people. And I think similar to other parts in the world, but I think in other parts of the world, you probably have a bigger generation of older people and some youngsters coming through. I definitely, I think it is, from a technology perspective, again, if I can start with, kind of a technology view, the older generation don't really have, I don't want to call it trust, but I think their level of experience with technology is not always that good. And I think that, again, is where you can or need to simplify your engagement with technology to make it attractive for the young people and really exciting and interesting, but also keep it kind of to what is necessary for your older generation. Yeah, I don't know, maybe Chris or Duncan, you guys can add to that. Yeah.
No, I think it just, again, points, back to the fact that it will have to be an individual experience, and understanding the various journeys that people have, in their relationship with their employer, and personalizing it will definitely add to, a positive employee experience. But again, like Elmo said, a consumer grade and a consumer type of experience for employees, wouldn't that just be marvelous?
Yeah, I think we can learn quite a bit from marketeers on this, because they've been doing this in the consumer space for decades, and I think the power of design thinking and using journey maps and personas is a great way to tackle this, because what you can do is you can look at the key personas in your organization and really design those experiences around them. I mean, the best experiences are not a fluke. They haven't just happened. In the consumer world, very smart people have been spending a lot of time really thinking and designing every aspect of that. And so, where we have huge generational differences within an organization, well, perhaps that's a reflection of some of the key personas that we've got, and we need to really think about that personalized experience that Chris is talking about from their perspective. So I really think that using design thinking and some of the tools around that is a great way to look at this.
So this is a good question that's come in. We've touched on this a little bit, but as companies think about their budget for the new year, why must digital employee experience be at the top of the priority list, and how can data and analytics tools help support that? So maybe we can take this question and think about, if HR leaders going into a meeting with their C-suite, which data points should they be bringing with them to get the budget that they need to deliver this personalized employee experience that we know is going to transform the lives of the employees?
I think some of the statistics that you showed at the front there, Duncan, is possibly helpful in this conversation. But I think it is a proven fact that a positive employee experience will enhance retention, will reduce absenteeism, will increase profitability, but will also result in a better customer experience for the organization's customer. So a happy employee, when he then engages with the customer, will have a far more positive approach to customers. So I think those metrics are well documented and well researched. I think, you know, part of the challenge might possibly be that an organization have already invested quite a bit in technology, be it, you know, the different parts of technology and disparate technology. Not looking at it from an employee experience point of view will actually detract from the investment that you could have made in those various pieces of technology. So bringing it all together and making sure that the employee experience is a positive one throughout the multiple touch points with the various pieces of technology will enhance the return on investment on the technology that you've already bought and implemented.
Thanks, Chris. Duncan or Alma, do you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
Yeah, maybe if I may, Rachel, I think I agree. I think some of the statistics in this research is very relevant. Something else that you can consider also looking at is our PwC CEO survey. You know, talent retention and attraction is top of mind of CEOs today. I think it might be, you know, number 2 or 3 as a challenge that CEOs see for the future. And we are experiencing that now in such a much bigger way. Any HR executive that need to go and motivate, I'm sure that there will be an easy conversation. Yes? As long as you tie it back to what you're trying to achieve in whatever investment you're making is enhancing your employee experience, and like Chris said, how that translates then through the rest of the organization.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question, and it's a philosophical one. So looking for responses from all of you on this one. Is there such a thing as a future-proof employee experience strategy?
You want me to go first, Rachel?
Looks like it's going to be you, Duncan.
Quick question.
Well, I think we can only do what we know right now, and I think things will change. We've seen, I think, if there's one thing that we can learn from the last 18 months, is that if we want to, we can move really quickly and bring about enormous change, you know, really fast. There's certainly a lot of things we don't know about the future, but I think organizations that have really designed themselves to be agile and innovative are able to react more quickly to change. So, you know, we've always got to start with that vision, we've got to start with that strategy, we've got to deliver on that. But an agile HR organization is going to be able to respond to that more quickly than an organization that is very slow to respond to change. And I think bringing about a structure that allows us to adapt and innovate, I think is really important to adapt that going forward.
Yeah, I think the words that came up in my head was, yes, I think one can have a future-proof employee experience strategy, provided that is agile and provided that it can respond to changes. So I think, as with many people strategies, one needs to be agile and one needs to be able to respond to a changing environment. And I think any good HR strategy will be one that is adaptable and is responsive, but also, you know, future looking and proactive and anticipating the needs and anticipating what is lying ahead. I think a lot of companies did not anticipate a COVID, but was quick to respond. I think there are other events that one can anticipate. We, for example, know that there's a huge skill shortage, and companies can respond to that, can anticipate it and can respond. So I think where one can anticipate, one should, but then equally be ready to respond quickly when needs be.
Yeah, maybe Rachel, if I consider my kids and how they're approaching the digital lifestyle and, you know, digitally native, you know, I don't think that's ever possible, you know. Now these youngsters come in with way off ideas about what they're expecting from employees. No, I think tongue in cheek, I think absolutely possible, and I agree with agility is very important, but we also need to consider the young generation that is coming into the workforce and what are they going to expect from employees. It radically changes, and I think that is why Duncan and Chris, as you mentioned, you know, embedding and instilling an agile mindset and You know, agility in the HR organization is so important. You know, don't consider the investments that you're making as a 5-year return. You know, look at those investments. You know, I need to see some result in the next 6 months, and then pivot and implement further changes, and then pivot and implement further changes. I think that is maybe a good way of approaching it. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your time today and those fantastic insights that you all shared. Contact details of everybody that was on the webinar today are up on your screen right now. But as I mentioned, we will be sending out the recording, we'll be sending out the slide deck, so you'll have all of that information accessible to you. But if you do want to continue the conversation, please feel free to reach out to anybody that joined us here today. So thank you, Duncan, thank you, Chris, thank you, Elmo, and everybody that joined us today. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.